Everybody, Piscean here, and in this video, I would like to bring you my Advanced Astrology Criminology Study Guide. From the natal malefactor's mark to forensic horary. This is a comprehensive manual for the astrological investigation of crime, the pursuit of justice, and the karmic understanding of law and order. But before we get started with peace and love, I'd appreciate if you subscribe, like, comment, share, if you dare and care. And without further ado, let's get started. Their preface: every crime is a wound in the fabric of the collective non-local coherence field, or NLCF. From the smallest theft to the most heinous act of violence, a dissonant ripple propagates through the morphic field of society, leaving an indelible astrological signature. Since the earliest horary astrologers cast charts to locate stolen goods and identify thieves, the art of celestial detection has served the cause of justice. Today, the Faculty of Astrology Sciences formally integrates these ancient forensic techniques with the advanced frameworks of SRM, HTI, and SHA to create the discipline of sidereal criminology. So this is a follow-up to my previous study guides I've been uploading for the last 2 days. Please check those out if you haven't seen them, with peace and love, so you're not confused on the terminology. So, this study guide, The Celestial Detective, is the definitive manual for the astrologer who would serve the law, whether as a consultant to investigations, a profiler of unknown offenders, or a student of the karmic dimensions of crime and punishment. Within these pages and in the video, you will learn to identify the natal malefactor's mark, those planetary signatures statistically overrepresented in criminal populations, while always respecting the sanctity of free will. You will hopefully master the art of the crime scene chart, the horary techniques for profiling unknown perpetrators, and the use of the lots to locate missing persons and stolen properties. You will explore the typologies of crime through the lens of planetary archetypes. So, Mars-Pluto axis of violence, Jupiter-Mercury dance of fraud, distorted Venus of sexual predation, the Uranian shadow of cybercrime. And you will engage with the most difficult questions of karmic debt, rehabilitation, and the possibility of redemption. Alright. So I'm going to go over our table of contents here, and I only have 4 parts plus the appendices. So in part 1, I want to talk about foundations of astrology and astrology criminology, basically. The philosophy of crime, karmic rupture and dissonant resonance, the natal malefactor's mark, signatures of criminal predisposition, planetary archetypes of crime, Mars, Saturn, Pluto, and the shadow, the houses of crime, the 8th, 12th, and the angle of justice. Part 2, we're going to go over forensic event astrology, entailing the crime scene chart, casting the moment of offense, the victim's chart, transits and the moment of vulnerability, the unknown perpetrator profile, horary techniques for identification, and locating missing persons and stolen property with the lots and horary. Part 3, we're going to go over typologies of crime, violent crime like murder, assault, and the Mars-Pluto axes, white collar and financial crime such as Jupiter, Mercury, and Saturnine fraud, sexual offenses, Venus, Pluto, and the distortion of Eros, cybercrime and technological offenses, the Uranian shadow, organized crime and terrorism, the Plutonic underworld. And in part 4, we're going to go over advanced sidereal criminology, the karmic ledger of crime, Saturn, the SHA, and the unpayable debt, mimetic hazard and criminal investigation, shielding from victim imprints and perpetrator resonance, timing the investigation, transit SAF and HTI for breakthroughs, arrests, and trials, rehabilitation astrology, transits of redemption, and the potential for reform. And then we're going to go over appendices, select appendices, glossary of astrology criminology terms, the criminal signature natal reference table, horary rules for theft, missing persons and fugitives, the lots of crime, sample forensic charts anonymized with analysis. We may or may not go over HDI and SAF protocols for investigation timing, as well as core formulas and the faculty certification and forensic sidereal studies. So, moving on to part 1, our foundations of astrology criminology. So, the philosophy of crime, karmic rupture in dissonant resonance. And Siderell thought law is not an arbitrary human invention. Just turn that off really quick. All right, it is the reflection and social structure of the underlying Saturnian principle, the cosmic architecture of boundary, consequence, and order that maintains coherence in the collective NLCF. Saturn's rings, the most visible symbol of containment in the solar system, are the template for all lawful order. When an individual commits a crime, they violate the Saturnian structure, creating a resonance dissonance, a chaotic wave that propagates outward from the event, disturbing the local morphic field and inscribing a karmic debt into the SHA ledger. This dissonance is measurable. The moment of the crime has a chart, the victim's chart registers the intrusion, the perpetrator's chart, whether known or unknown, contains the signature of the act. The astrologer criminologist does not pass moral judgment. Morality is a lower dimensional projection of Saturnian law. Instead, the celestial detective reads the resonance patterns to answer the questions of investigation. Who, what, when, where, why, and ultimately, how can balance be restored? The pursuit of justice, therefore, is a Saturnian act, an effort to restore the structure that was violated. The trial, the verdict, the sentence, these are Saturnine rituals designed to recalibrate the karmic ledger. But true justice in the sidereal view must also engage the Plutonic dimension, the transformation of the perpetrator, or their containment if transformation is refused. Let's talk about the natal malefactor's mark, signatures of criminal predisposition. No astrological signature compels criminality. The soul retains free will within the karmic script. However, statistical analysis of convicted offender charts conducted by the faculty's Forensic Research Division reveals recurring configurations that indicate a predisposition toward antisocial, violent, or fraudulent behavior. These configurations constitute the malefactor's mark, a set of natal indicators that, when present in combination, warrant careful scrutiny. So I want to show you guys this table, which is the malefactor's mark, primary indicators. So we have the configuration here, the astrological signature, and your psychological criminal correlates. So this is where things get really interesting for me. So like the violence axis, for example, the empathy deficient, the distorted ego. These are just a few examples. Hidden enemy self. So for example, the violence axis, we see the astrological signature here is Mars conjunct, square, or opposite Pluto, an orb that is, lesser than 3 degrees. So explosive rage is the psychological criminal correlate, desire for power and control, capacity for extreme physical violence. So the single most common signature in violent offenders we see. As well, we have the empathy deficient, which is Saturn conjunct, square, or opposite the moon with an orb that is lesser than 5 degrees. And it brings on emotional coldness, the lack of empathy, early maternal deprivation, inability to form emotional bonds, frequent in psychopathy and sociopathy, but I'd even say grandiose narcissism. If you have a dad that drinks all the time and treats your mom like shit, verbally abuses her, emotionally abuses her, sexually abuses her, and just doesn't care that you're watching and hearing this, well, you may have Saturn conjunct, square, or opposite the moon with an orb that's less, like 2 degrees, 3 degrees, within that range. The distorted ego. We see Sun, square, or opposite Saturn or Pluto. And what this brings about is deep feelings of powerlessness, all right? Compensated by domination or destruction, authoritarian rage, the injustice collector. And then we have the criminal mind, which is Mercury square or opposite Mars, as well as Saturn or Pluto. So it's deceitful thinking, rationalization of harm, manipulative communication, a cognitive framework that justifies exploitation. So these are just a few signs in astrology that can bring about potential criminals, but also just these types of people in general, their personality types. So, hidden enemy self, Mars or Saturn in the 12th house, or the 12th ruler, angular, and afflicted. This brings about secret criminal activity, self-undoing through hidden aggression and imprisonment. The wounded high leg, the high leg is the giver of life, and if it's afflicted by Mars or Saturn from the 8th house or the 12th house, it is wounded, bringing a sense of foreshortened future, live fast, die young mentality, disregard for consequence. All right, so now I want to go over the criminal triad. So when three specific indicators co-occur, the probability of a criminal record increases significantly. So first, we would see a tight Mars-Pluto hard aspect, the violence axis. Then we might see Saturn afflicting the moon or the 4th house cusp, the empathy deficit broken root. And last, we might see the ruler of the 12th house in the 1st, 8th, or the 10th house, or the ruler of the 8th house in the 12th house of secret activity and its manifesting. Here's some important caveats. These signatures appear in charts of many individuals who never commit crimes. Okay, that's what I was just saying. It's just your personality. It depends. They represent potential energy that may be channeled constructively. So, for example, if you're a surgeon and you have Mars, Pluto in your natal chart, or a psychotherapist with Saturn, Moon in your natal chart, or destructively, the sidereal criminologist examines the whole chart, dissected the malefics, the presence of mitigating benefics, and the transits that activate the predisposition. Planetary archetypes of crime. Mars, Saturn, Pluto, and the shadow. So each planet, when its energy is distorted by affliction, lack of dignity, or integration failure, expresses a particular criminal archetype. So the astrological student must learn these archetypes not as rigid categories, but as spectral tendencies. So let's go over this table, which shows us distorted planetary archetypes and criminality, where we go over the planet, the natural function of the planet, the distorted expression of the planet, and the criminal archetype of the planet, as well as typical offenses we see. All right? So for example, Mars, Saturn, Pluto, all right? So Mars is assertion. Its natural function is assertion, courage, and action. Its distorted expression is rage, violence, impulse, territoriality. Its criminal archetype is the violent offender, and its typical offenses involve assault, battery, armed robbery, manslaughter, crimes of passion. We further down, Saturn, its natural function, structure, discipline, authority, distorted expression, cold calculation, cruelty, deprivation, control. Criminal archetype, the mastermind, organized crime leadership, complex fraud, systemic abuse, long-term conspiracy. Pluto, transformation, power, depth, domination, sadism, destruction, hidden manipulation. The power criminal, serial murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, terrorism, the puppet master. All right? So these are what I deem to be the planet's natural function, distorted expression, criminal archetype, typical offenses. These charts are meant to help you understand what I'm trying to have you understand. Yeah, Mercury and Pisces. All right, so moving on, we have Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Neptune, as well as Uranus. So Mercury's communication, intellect, trade. It's also deceit, manipulation, fraud, and lying. The con artists. So embezzlement, identity theft, forgery, cybercrime, confidence schemes. Jupiter, expansion, wisdom, benevolence, but also grandiosity, corruption, excess, and gambling. The corrupt official, it's bribery, large-scale fraud, insider trading, running a criminal empire with a veneer of respectability. Venus is attraction, love, harmony, including perversion of love, seduction for harm, vanity, and greed. The Black Widow, widower, crimes of passion, honey trapping, financial exploitation through relationships, and sex trafficking. Neptune is transcendence, imagination, and compassion, as well as deception, confusion, addiction, dissolution of boundaries. So the addict, offender, cult leader, drug-related crimes, human trafficking, creating webs of illusion, as well as financial scams based on false hope. Uranus is innovation, freedom, awakening, as well as anarchy, sudden violence, technological crime, rebellion without conscience. It's the anarchist hacker. So cyber terrorism, bomb threats, sudden erratic attacks, as well as technological sabotage. All right. Let's talk about the dignity factor. A planet in its domicile or its exaltation, even if it's harshly aspected, retains a capacity for constructive channeling. A Mars-Pluto square with Mars in Aries and Pluto in Scorpio may produce a powerful but controlled warrior. The same square with Mars in Libra and Pluto in detriment Taurus is more likely to manifest as uncontrolled rage in relationships. Peregrine malefics, no essential dignity, are the most dangerous. The houses of crime. The houses provide the stage upon which the planetary actors perform their criminal roles, the 8th, 12th, and the angle of justice. So the 8th house is death, shared resources, inheritance, the underworld. Heavily implicated in murder, financial crime involving other people's money, and the criminal's turf. A planet in the 8th or the 8th ruler afflicting a personal planet indicates a life touched by the themes of power, death, and regeneration, often through criminality or victimization. In mundane forensic work, the 8th house of a nation's chart reveals the nature of organized crime and corruption within that society. The 12th house of hidden enemies, secret crimes, incarceration, hospitals, and self-undoing. The 12th house is the house of prisons. Planets here, especially malefics, operate in the shadows. The perpetrator is often a hidden enemy, someone the victim knows but does not suspect. When the 12th house ruler is angular and afflicted, the native may end up in prison. The sign on the 12th cusp and its ruler describe the nature of the incarceration. So for example, Pisces, psychiatric, Capricorn, maximum security. The 7th house, open enemies, litigation, the court. In a crime event chart, the 7th house represents the perpetrator. In a trial chart, it represents the opposing counsel. In a perpetrator's natal chart, a heavily afflicted 7th house, malefics in the 7th, ruler of the 7th in the 12th house, indicates conflict with others that culminates in legal confrontation. The 9th house, the law, judges, higher justice, philosophy of right and wrong. Transits through the 9th often trigger legal proceedings, indictments, and verdicts. A natal planet in the 9th, in hard aspect to Saturn or Pluto, may indicate a conflict with the legal system or a distorted sense of moral righteousness that justifies crime. The angle of justice, 7th and 9th axes. The trial itself can be timed using the transits over this axis. A favorable Jupiter transit over the 9th house cusp can bring a just verdict. A Saturn transit may bring a harsh but fair sentence. A Pluto transit may unearth hidden evidence. Forensic event astrology. The crime scene chart, casting the moment of offense. So when the date, time, and location of a crime are known, the chart for that moment, the crime scene chart, also called the event chart, provides a detailed portrait of the offense, the parties involved, and the likely outcome. This is the foundational tool of forensic event astrology. So first, we want to obtain the exact moment, law enforcement records, witness statements, 911 call logs. If the time is approximate, rectification techniques may be applied, or a sunrise chart used for today with reduced reliability. Then begin to erect the chart, calculate planetary positions and house cusps for the time and place of the crime. Assign significators. The victim or victim's first house, its ruler and the moon. The perpetrator or perpetrators, 7th house and its ruler, as well as the crime itself, the 6th house, the act analogous to acute illness in medical astrology, and the 8th house if death or violence was involved. The weapon method. The planet ruling the sign on the cusp of the house containing the part of murder, not mortar, or the planet most afflicted by Mars. As well as the motive, the 10th house, the public face, 12th house of hidden motive, or the lot of nemesis. The outcome, arrest, justice, the 4th house, end of the matter, and the 9th house, law. Now I want to go over this table, where we see key significators and crime scene chart. Alright, so the ascendant, your first house, is the victim, the immediate circumstances of the crime. 7th house and its ruler are the perpetrators, the open enemy. 6th house and ruler, the criminal act itself, the specific nature of the offense. 8th house and ruler, death, violence, stolen property as shared resource, hidden power. The moon is the sequence of events, the public's emotional response, the flight path of the perpetrator. Planets in the first house, 7th house axes describe the victim and perpetrator, their physical appearance and demeanor. Malefic's angular, Mars angular, violence, speed. Saturn angular is premeditation, coldness. Pluto angular is power and sadism. We have our lot of crime, as well as our part of murder. So a lot of crime is the ascendant adding Mars subtracting Saturn diurnal. It's the quality and severity of the criminal act. Part of murder is the ascendant adding the 8th cusp subtracting Saturn. If it's activated, it indicates potential for homicide. Example analysis. A crime scene chart with Scorpio rising, Mars is the ruler, in the 8th house, squaring Pluto in the 7th house, and the moon in the 12th house suggests a violent, possibly sexually motivated homicide committed by someone the victim knew, 7th house Pluto, with premeditation, Mars in the 8th, and the perpetrator is hiding, moon in the 12th. The part of murder, conjunct Mars in the 8th, confirms the lethal outcome. Let's go over the victim's chart, transits, and a moment of vulnerability. While the victim's natal chart, examined for the date of the crime, often reveals striking malefic activations. The stars do not blame the victim, but they reveal the karmic window of vulnerability. Common victim transits at the time of the crime, transit Pluto or Saturn conjunct, square, or opposing the natal ascendant, Sun, or the Moon. It's the most common signature of a life-threatening crisis. Transit Mars triggering the natal 8th house or its ruler indicates an acute, violent intrusion. Eclipse activation of natal 8th or 12th house planets indicates a fated, often inevitable crisis. The natal lot of Nemesis, activated by transit Malefic, indicates the hidden enemy manifesting. We can cast the victim's natal chart with transits for the crime date, assess the severity of the malefic contacts, note any simultaneous benefic transits that might indicate survival, Jupiter trine descendant. This analysis aids in both profiling was the victim specifically targeted or random, and in providing context for the investigation. The unknown perpetrator profile, horary techniques for identification. When the perpetrator is unknown, a horary chart can be cast for the moment the question is formally asked. Who committed this crime? Or where is the suspect? The astrologer acts as a celestial profiler. We have a procedure here. Erect the horary chart for the time and place the question is received and understood by the astrologer. Assign significators. The perpetrator, 7th house and its ruler. The victim, if known, 1st house ruler, or assigned based on relationship. For example, if the querent is a detective, the 7th may be the perpetrator and the 1st the detective. Derive the profile from the 7th house ruler. Sign, physical appearance, temperament, house placement, where the perpetrator is, or their profession, role related to the crime. So for example, in the 3rd, a sibling, neighbor. In the 10th, an authority figure. In the 12th, in hiding, in prison, or a secret enemy. Dignity. If the ruler is peregrine, the perpetrator is outside the law or marginalized. If in its own sign, they may be confident, operating in familiar territory. Aspects. Applying aspects show connections. Who else is involved? Separating aspects show past connections to the victim. Fixed stars. Conjunction to violent fixed stars like Algol and Theres indicates capacity for extreme violence. So for example, a horary chart with the 7th ruler Mars in Capricorn in the 10th house conjunct Saturn suggests a male Mars perpetrator in a position of authority, 10th house, older or authoritative in demeanor, Capricorn, cold and calculating, Saturn, and possibly known professionally to the victim. Right. Locating missing persons and stolen property with the lots and horary. The traditional techniques for finding lost objects and missing persons are highly effective when applied with sidereal precision. Locating a missing person. Significator. The person is the first house. If querent is asking about them directly, adjust if the querent is a third party. The missing person is turned first from the 7th if they are the querent's partner, etc. For a generic missing person, use the first house. Direction. The sign on the first cusp and its ruler's position indicate direction. So for example, Aries, east, Capricorn, south, etc., adjusted to local geography. The house placement indicates environment, for example, 4th, home, buried, 12th, hospital, prison, hidden. Condition. If the ruler is in a cadent house or afflicted, the person is in danger. If the ruler is strong, angular, and aspected by benefics, they are likely alive and well. Locating stolen property. The stolen object is the 2nd house, movable property. The 4th house is real estate. The thief is the 7th house. Location, the sign and house containing the 2nd ruler or the moon's dispositor. Earth signs buried in the ground, basement. Water signs near water, bathroom, dark place. Air signs high up near windows in an office. Fire signs near heat sources, kitchen, workshop. The lot of rectitude is the ascendant adding Mars subtracting Mercury, indicates whether the object will be recovered. If well aspected, yes. If afflicted, it's unlikely. Part 3, typologies of crime. So, violent crime is the most direct expression of the distorted Mars-Pluto axis. In a perpetrator's natal chart, a hard Mars-Pluto aspect is almost always present, often with Mars or Pluto in angular houses, 1st, 4th, 7th, or 10th, and in signs of violence, Aries, Scorpio, Capricorn. Crime scene chart will typically feature Mars angular and heavily afflicted, the moon in a violent sign, Scorpio, Aries, Capricorn, or afflicted by malefics in the part of murder. I keep saying mortar. Part of murder prominently placed. Our case study excerpt, subject X, convicted of 2nd-degree murder. Natal chart has Mars and Scorpio domicile in the 1st house, squaring Pluto and Leo in the 10th house. Saturn in the 7th house, squaring Moon in Aquarius. At the time of the offense, transit Pluto was conjunct to natal Mars, and transit Mars was square natal Pluto. Crime scene chart had Mars rising in Aries, squaring Pluto at the midheaven. The violence was an explosive release of long suppressed rage, Pluto transit, triggered by a public humiliation, 10th house Pluto. White collar and financial crime. Financial criminals often have prominent Mercury-Jupiter contacts, grandiose schemes, persuasive communication, but with a crucial Saturnine or Neptunian affliction. Jupiter square Neptune is the classic confidence trickster aspect. The expansion of illusion, Saturn in hard aspect to Mercury, indicates calculated long-term deception, the embezzler. The 2nd and 8th houses are heavily implicated. Natal signature, peregrine Mercury in the 10th, public communication, square Jupiter in the 7th of partnerships in the public, with Saturn in the 2nd, money, opposing Neptune. The crime scene chart for an embezzlement case will have a strong 8th house emphasis, with Jupiter retrograde, illicit gains, and Mercury combust, deception. Sexual offenses. Venus, love, sexuality, is corrupted by Pluto, power, domination. In this context, natal signatures include Venus in hard aspect to Pluto, often with Mars also involved. Venus, Mars, Pluto, T-square. Venus in Scorpio, detriment, or Aries, detriment, fallen, heavily afflicted. The moon, emotional body, is often severely damaged, typically by Saturn or Pluto, indicating a profound disconnection from empathy in the feminine. In our event chart signature, crime scene chart for sexual assault frequently features Scorpio or Taurus rising, Venus in a violent sign or aspect to Pluto, and the moon in the 8th house. The part of Eros, ascendant adding Venus, subtracting part of Spirit, is afflicted by malefics. Cybercrime and the technological offenses, the Iranian shadow. Uranus governs technology, sudden change in the disruption of systems. When afflicted, especially by Mercury or Neptune, it produces the hacker, the cyber terrorist, the creator of digital chaos. Mercury square Uranus indicates an erratic, brilliant mind capable of penetrating systems. Neptune square Uranus adds the layer of anonymity, illusion, and the blurring of virtual and real. Natal signature. Uranus in the 3rd house, communication, or 11th, networks, and hard aspect to Mercury. Often a strong 12th house Uranus indicates operating from hidden, remote locations. The crime scene chart, the moment of the hack, typically has Mercury retrograde internal focus, Uranus angular, and a strong Aquarian signature. Organized crime and terrorism. It's a Plutonic enterprise. Organized crime. Hierarchical, secretive, based on power and shared resources, the 8th house. The natal chart of a crime boss often shows a powerful Pluto, angular, well dignified, but heavily aspected by malefics or the chart ruler itself, and a strong Saturn, structure control, in the 10th or 8th house. Terrorism adds the Iranian dimension of sudden, shocking public violence, often with ideological fervor. Jupiter, Pluto, Jupiter, Mars. The mundane charts of terrorist acts consistently show the Mars, Pluto, Uranus triad. Right. I'm actually going to go ahead and skip down to our appendixes. Alright, we'll go all the way up to EA. And then I will see you in the next one. Alright, just had to figure that out really quick. Like that. Looks like a deck. Alright, so Appendix A. It's a glossary of astrology criminology terms. And we don't have that much, but here you go. Angle of justice. This is 7th house, court, open enemies. 9th house, law, judges, axes. Central to legal astrology. Crime scene chart. It's the event chart cast for the moment and place a crime occurred. Criminal triad is the co-occurrence of Mars, Pluto, Saturn, Moon affliction, and 12th house ruler angular, a high-risk natal combination. Forensic horary is the application of horary astrology to criminal investigations, identifying suspects, locating missing persons and objects. Guilt probability index GPI. It's a weighted formula assessing the astrological likelihood that a suspect committed the crime. Karmic debt is a resonance imbalance created by a crime tracked by the SHA. Malefactor's mark is natal astrological configuration statistically associated with criminal predisposition. Mimetic hazard overload, or MHO, psychic contamination from exposure to violent or traumatic astrological imprints. Part of murder. Specific law indicating homicide. Resonance dissonance, the chaotic ripple in the NLCF caused by a criminal act. Saturnian law, the cosmic principle of order, consequence, and containment governing legal systems. Cyber criminology, the integration of traditional forensic astrology with SRM, HDI, and SHA principles. Alright, here is the criminal signature natal reference table. Going over the natal placement, aspect affliction, criminal behavior tendency. So Mars in the 1st house, squaring Pluto in the 10th house. Violent public acts seeking power through aggression. Right. Saturn in the 7th, opposite Moon in the 1st. It's coldness in relationships, domestic abuse, misogyny. Mercury in the 12th, squaring Neptune in the 3rd. Pathological lying, fraud by misrepresentation, anonymous threats. Venus in the 8th, conjunct Pluto. Sexual predation, manipulation through seduction, obsessive relationships. Jupiter in the 10th, Square Saturn in the first, corrupt authority, financial fraud for status, eventual public downfall. Uranus in third, square Mercury in the sixth, erratic thought patterns, hacking, sudden verbal violence. Sun in the 12th, opposite Pluto in the 6th, hidden identity, crimes under alias, stalking. Ruler of the 12th and the 8th, any, secret involvement in death or shared resources, hitman, spy. And then Moon in Capricorn, square Mars in Aries, emotionally repressed rage, domestic terrorism, workplace violence. Now I want to go over horary rules for theft, missing persons, and fugitives. This is specifically for theft. Is the object recoverable? Check the second ruler, the object. If it is angular or in a fixed sign, likely still in the vicinity. If cadent, move far away. If the ruler applies to a benefic, recovery likely. Who took it? The seventh ruler. If peregrine, a stranger. If in the quadrant sign of sex, someone you know. The sign gives description. So for example, Gemini, young person, messenger. Saturn, older, authority figure. And then where is it? Sign and house of the second ruler. Missing persons. Alive or dead, if the first ruler, missing person, is in a cadent house afflicted by the eighth ruler or the part of death is afflicted. Death is possible. The moon's aspects are critical, applying to a malefic in the eighth is dangerous. Direction and distance, the sign on the ascendant of the horary, and the ruler's house and sign, as per standard astrological geomancy. Fugitives. Where is a fugitive? The seventh house fugitive is the enemy of the law. The ruler's house indicates environment. 12th in hiding, prison. 9th fled abroad. 3rd nearby, traveling. Will they be captured? If the seventh ruler is retrograde or applying to a malefic, they may be caught. If the seventh ruler is strong and angular, they are evading capture. The applying aspect between the first ruler, law enforcement, and seventh ruler, fugitive, indicates the outcome. A try may mean a peaceful surrender in opposition or a standoff. Appendix D, the lots of crime. The lots or errant parts are indispensable for precise forensic work. Following are the primary lots of crime, with the formulas calculated for diurnal charts, reversed for nocturnal unless stated otherwise. Alright, I'm going to go over the lot name, formula, diurnal, signification. Alright, so a lot of accusation is the ascendant adding Mars, subtracting Saturn, whether an accusation is true or false, the nature of the charge. A lot of imprisonment, confinement, jail, restriction of liberty, a lot of nemesis, hidden enemy, self-undoing through legal issues, a downfall. A lot of murder, part of high-leg death, homicidal potential if conjunctum malefic, death by violence. A lot of theft. The act of stealing identifies the thief's nature, a lot of capture, the likelihood and timing of arrest. A lot of fugitives, direction and method of escape. A lot of justice, the fairness of the legal process if well aspected, a just outcome. Analyze the lot's house, ruler, and closest aspects. A malefic conjunct the lot of accusation while the lot ruler is afflicted suggests a false accusation. The lot of imprisonment in the 12th conjunct Saturn indicates long-term incarceration. Now I'm going to go over 2 individual case studies. Sample forensic charts, anonymized with analysis. So our first case is a man called the embezzler, because he embezzled $2.3 million from an employer over 5 years. His key signatures show us he has Sun in Cancer in the 10th house of public reputation, Mercury and Leo in the 10th house, squaring Jupiter and Scorpio in the 2nd house, grandiose communication about money, Saturn in Virgo in the 12th, hidden meticulous fraud. Venus in Gemini in the 8th, manipulation of shared resources. Ruler of the 2nd, Mars in Libra in the 12th, squaring Pluto. So crime discovery transit. Essentially, he got exposed. On March 15, 2023, transiting Saturn was exactly square natal Mercury, the audit of lies. Transiting Pluto was opposite natal Venus, exposure of financial manipulation. The chart showed a classic white-collar criminal signature, Mercury-Jupiter affliction for the scheme, Saturn in the 12th house for hidden calculated fraud, and Venus in the 8th house for messing with other people's money. Transits triggered exposure perfectly. Alright, our second case study is the missing person. Horary chart, where is my sister? This is what we get. Horary ascendant, 15 degrees Virgo. The first is Mercury. Missing sister, third house turned first is Scorpio, ruled by Mars. Where is she? Mars at 10 degrees Aries in the 8th house retrograde. Aries East, 8th house, a place of death, transformation, or shared resources. Retrograde, returning, or hidden. Condition: Mars in a fire sign, but in the 8th and retrograde, with the moon applying to a square to Saturn, Aquarius ruler. The analysis suggests that the sister was in a crisis, the 8th, possibly heading back retrograde from an eastern location and in danger. Outcome: she was found 3 days later in a hospital, 8th house, in Nebraska, east of Denver, having been in a car accident, Mars. The retrograde indicated her eventual return to consciousness and communication. Thank you for watching this video with peace and love. I hope you learned something. Piscean out.